That was incredible.
Yeah. I don't know what to do after that. We were just watching backstage, like, are we just gonna public cry the whole time?
Yeah, we'll do our best to keep it together. No promises. So as you all just heard, Grace has just released an album, and it just comes at such an interesting point in your career. You've been releasing music sort of nonstop since you were not long out of your teens.
Yeah, it was actually 19, I think.
Okay, so I'm going to go through it. So your original band formed when you were still in college. This is Grace and the Nocturnals. You guys released 4 albums.
Yep.
You were doing these collaborations. You heard the mention of the work with Kenny Chesney. Yep. And you put out a solo record, Midnight, in 2015, and then
Everything
nothing?
stopped.
For 4, almost 5 years. And you said that during that period, you actually thought that maybe your career as a professional musician had kind of run its course.
Yeah.
So take us back to that, and tell us what changed your mind and gave us this new album.
I was mad at music. I didn't know who to blame, so I thought, wouldn't it be easy to say, like, this is something I've done my whole life. It's something that I learned to do. I didn't learn, I just had it. And, oh, do I need a microphone? Okay. All right. Hi. Can you hear me now? Hi. I had grown up knowing how to make music and knowing how to emote, but I wasn't at peace with why music had chosen me. And then, you know, as a teenager, I got swept up in it, and my band, and there's all these people that wanted to come see me, and I was a very confused kind of outlier in the music industry. And I just thought, for all this success, there's also a lot of pain that comes with fame, and even just a little bit, because I'm really not that famous. Nobody here knows who I am. A couple people maybe, but it's the people who asked me to come here. And I think
maybe more people than you think.
The important thing to realize is that as a young person, you don't know who you want to be. And I have so much more of an understanding of who I am now. And I think the more I got to know myself, the more I wondered if music was actually my calling, or if it was just something that I was really good at that got me attention, you know? So this time off was really important for me to understand, because so many people had been hurt. I fell in love with my record producer, making a record that was supposed to be a record with my band. And it was all males except myself, and I found myself in this position of wanting to have my, like, Cyndi Lauper, Annie Lennox, Pointer Sisters, like, dance record, Donna Summer dance record. And I was like, right, guys? Like, this is gonna be great. And they were just like, no, that's not what we're doing here. So that's why that record became a solo record. And through the process, my producer was someone who I wasn't looking to fall in love with, but I did. So it felt like a good time to take a break. The band had broken up. My marriage had fallen apart. I was married to my drummer. Met him when I was in my teens, and, you know, so there was a lot of growth that happened in that process.
And what made you think, you know, you'd gone through this process, you had gone solo, you had gotten divorced, you'd gotten remarried, you had a baby. What made you think, okay, now we've been through that, it's time for a new album?
I didn't. I was just broke.
That is a great answer.
No, I mean, there's a lot more there. But there is the reality. I wanted to explore the possibility that I could take another career, and I took house painting very seriously when I was a young kid, because it paid for my first 2 records. So before I was a signed artist, I paid for all my albums, making, you know, houses look beautiful. So I thought I could do that again and make the same amount of money, and it turns out that's not how it works.
Yeah, no, that does not sound like how it works. You have also said that you've compared this new album to a journal, and said it's your most personal, and you're writing songs about these things, about some joyful times in your life, but also some painful times. So what's it like to take those like most intimate moments and put them out there where all of us can listen to them and pick over them?
You know, I still kind of can't believe that I've done that. And it's hard to express ideas that you have inside your head. I think if anyone's ever like written down that idea that you think is so brilliant, like on a napkin at a restaurant or whatever it is, and then suddenly someone has taken that sketch or that thing that you wrote and they're like taking it super seriously, and there's like a board of people that are like, okay, so we're going with the blue shoes on the, and you're like, no, that was just the initial thought. And for me, the journal entry aspect of this was that these weren't songs I was putting on a napkin and sharing with anybody. They were my napkins that were staying in my drawer in a time when I didn't really know how or if music was going to become a component of my life again. But what happened was I needed to heal, and I needed to process the breakup of my band, the loss of sense of self, and a lot of things that really felt defeating about not just the music industry, but my relationships that had fallen apart in my business and in my work. And I just process better through music, you know.
When we were talking about this before, you mentioned, you know, you've talked about the divorce and the falling in love and the baby, but that there was another very personal experience that you had that kind of opened you up to making this record, and that you just hadn't really felt like you've been in the right environment to talk about that. Yeah. Do you want to talk about it?
This is the only place I think I've had the thought that it would be the right time to share it, and that is that I went through a miscarriage, and so many of us have, and I know that that's something that's completely normal, but I only know that now because no one told me that it was normal. And so going through the process of it, having met someone and fallen head over heels and really experienced this tidal wave of love based on the fact that, like, on a biological level, I met my person that, like, I'm supposed to have kids with. And then finding out that maybe I couldn't, and facing the reality that that was something real. And then the excitement that we were pregnant, and then losing that was sad and hard. I think a lot of people understand what that feels like, but then telling someone about it, which I went to a women's circle the evening that I had miscarried. I actually went to a women's circle, and it was a group of people I'd never met before. And I don't know why I thought it would be okay to share this with a bunch of strangers, but I did. And I watched the most incredible transformation of all these strangers then turning into angels, and not just angels that were coming for me to help me, but they felt helped by me, that I gave them the permission to talk about it. And everyone started telling me their experiences, and more than half the women in the room had had miscarriages.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it, and I thought to myself, wow, maybe this isn't just about that experience. Maybe miscarriages happen all the time, but maybe miscarriages are a metaphor for everything else that happens all the time that we don't talk about. So falling in love with someone when you're married to someone else is a shitty thing to have happen. It's not fun.
Yeah.
And it's not fun for anyone. But when you're not inviting it, and then it happens to you, and then you talk about it a little bit, it's amazing how many stories have come back to me. It's amazing how many people felt like they finally, I was inviting the truth for myself, and that made it possible for other people to come to me and feel connected to me in a way that I had never invited in before.
I think that's why so many of us turn to music, is in those times when you're looking for that common experience.
Yeah.
And okay, this is actually a weirdly good transition. I did not plan this, but one of the reasons that I was so interested and excited to interview Grace is that she grew up in Vermont, and I grew up in Vermont, and it's just not a place.
Where's Vermont?
Exactly. I've never had an opportunity to interview someone on stage from Vermont before.
Yeah, it's a weird place to be from, isn't it?
It is. Well, I think that, I mean, I bring it up not just to talk about how much we love Ben and Jerry's and maple syrup, but I think in my experience at least, if you grow up in a more rural place, a place where maybe you don't have many people that you know who go on to careers like Grammy-nominated artists, it can be limiting in some ways. And I'm just curious, do you have someone that was a mentor for you when you were young, or were you just somebody who thought, like, there's so much more out there for me than what I see on a day-to-day basis in Waitsfield?
No, I thought that I was making it at every moment of my life. There's just this weird thing where I had this bizarre confidence in myself, even though I was, like I said, I was an outlier. I was a real outcast. I was told by my music teacher that I needed to not be in the band anymore because he could tell that I was pretending that I could read music. Okay. I was just listening and kind of like playing along, but I was not a student of music. I was musical. And I think in Vermont, there was such a small collection of musicians that it made it possible for me to kind of find my footing as a big fish in a small pond, no pun intended, because Fish is the only other band that came out of Vermont. But I think the person, there was a few people, but my mother said to me, Grace, fame is a curse. Find a way to be famous in small circles and matter to a few people and have your gravity hold its place. Trying to cover the world with your icing isn't going to work because there's just too much. There's just too much there. Yeah. And so I'm exploring those layers now, and I'm grateful to my mother for reminding me of that.
That's wonderful. Do we have any questions for Grace in the audience? I'm looking for the paddle. Okay. Oh, yes, we do have one back here. If you could just wait for the yellow paddle to make it to you.
Not a question, just a comment. I've seen you perform in Seattle, Washington. I'm a huge, huge fan. So if you haven't listened to Grace Potter, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Well, you're about to get to.
Thank you. That's so sweet.
Okay, okay, no, let's do a question wrap up over here.
I was just going to say again, too, Allie, I worked at Viacom at VH1 when you were You Ought to Know artist, so it's great to kind of be reacquainted 4 years later. Excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I've also seen you in Prospect Park.
Okay, so some people have seen me. It's very cool. This is a different setting than I'm used to, so I just assume that everybody here is a CEO or like have started some startup company, and I'm like, I can play the guitar.
Well, you all are about to hear it for yourselves if you have not. I just have to literally ask you one very quick question, which is, you describe yourself as a space nerd all the time. Your son's name is Sagan.
Sagan, as in Carl
Very
Sagan.
briefly, like, where did that come from?
Well, I fell in love with a man who was as much in love with space as me. And having come through high school being discouraged from STEM, like all science, technology, engineering and math was not my forte. And when I tested poorly, I found myself in a position where I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to do the music thing, which is, I think that's kind of where we started. Yeah. But I was approached by NASA to be an outreach representative and to be someone who could be a spokesperson for NASA, especially women in STEM. So I made a music video with one of my songs called Look What We've Become, which is a song about owning your power, especially when someone tells you you can't do something. And I met an astronaut on the shoot that day. This was 5 years ago, but she's become a very dear friend of mine. And so we talked a lot about Carl Sagan. And I thought, space is a thing that we all share. We're all made of stardust, if you want to get super weird about it.
This is true. This is true. Thank you so much, Grace. We are now going to get a special performance from Grace Potter.